Go ahead. Tamela Davis, docent, please give us a chapel tour.
Thank you, Carol. As I would begin, and our docents begin most tours, I want to welcome you to Duke Chapel. It is the heart of Duke University's West Campus and is an excellent example of American collegiate Gothic. Gothic architecture was developed in the Middle Ages in Europe. And one of the most fabulous resources that I've seen or read about was a book by Tom Follett called The Pillars of the Earth. Because when churches were built in the Middle Ages, it was like rocks from the earth, and that's why stones were selected, because that is from the earth, as was the mortar as it was developed to hold the rocks together as they built them up. One of the interesting things about Gothic architecture, and one of the reasons the Duke family chose Gothic architecture, it's an architecture of height. How do we get close to God as possible? And Gothic architecture accomplishes that with pier buttressing, which we'll see in a little bit. But on the exterior of the building, you will see series of what look like chimneys from the outside, and that is the exterior part of the pier buttressing, as is the triforium inside the nave. So the buttressing system is what allows Gothic architecture to achieve the high ceilings, which is getting close to God. Duke Chapel is the heart of the university. It is the first building that was planned because it is the highest geographical point on West Campus. James Buchanan Duke, whose statue is on the Able Quad, was the younger son of Washington Duke, the patriarch of the Duke family. They farmed in Durham, and their homestead, Duke Homestead, is still open to visitors. It's on Duke Homestead Road off Guest Road in Durham, and is easily accessible from Interstate 85 off Guest Road. And they farmed. They were just regular farmers until tobacco became the gold crop of this area and east of this area. So tobacco became the mainstay for many of the farmers in the Durham community and east of here, because the soil is so good for it. And you will hear about Golden Belt Tobacco Warehouse in downtown Durham, and that comes from the fact that tobacco wasn't such a money crop. The Dukes were extremely generous with their money, and when they helped Trinity College move to what is now East Campus off Main Street in Durham, they were instrumental in helping them move. And that was in the 1890s. That was originally a women's campus when Duke University was born, if you will, in 1924. And Duke University encompassed then Trinity College. Now East Campus is a freshman campus, and all the other students live on West Campus. Duke Chapel is on the exterior, is a beautiful stone that was quarried in Hillsborough, North Carolina, not too far from here. And the Dukes bought the quarry because it had been abandoned. And what was dug from there was volcanic bluestone. which you see not only on Duke Chapel, but on the Divinity School, Page Auditorium, and most of the original buildings of Duke University's West Campus, including Cameron Indoor Stadium. The chapel was designed by a Black man named Julian Abel, who was the chief architect for a firm out of Philadelphia, the Trumbauer Company. And that's very unusual and noteworthy because Duke University, as I said, was born in 1924, and that was prior to the Depression, the segregated South, the Jim Crow laws. So it was a very unusual, and women were just able to vote. So it was a very unusual move to hire the Black architect. The exterior of the building, again, is fronted by this bell tower, which is 210 feet tall. And at the top, Mitchell Eithon, who's our carillionaire and in the choir, plays the 50 bell carillon beautifully at 10:30 every Sunday and during the week. He's made some beautiful selections, and it is a manually played carillon that is best heard from on the quad, not inside. Again, this is a preeminent example of American collegiate Gothic architecture in the United States, and especially in the southeastern United States. We have thousands upon thousands of visitors from all over the world who come and visit the campus, but especially the chapel. Okay, Carol. Next.
There we go.
Yeah. This is an inscription on the exterior of the chapel, giving credit to the Trumbauer Company and to Julian Abel, the chief architect. So you can find that on, I believe it's on facing the chapel, it's on the right-hand side. So it's a very interesting thing to see on the exterior. And that's also a close-up of the beautiful stone that's used, again, not only in the chapel, but also in the other buildings. Okay.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah, okay. Did I see Edwin Dacus in there?
That's next, I think.
Oh, okay, okay. And this is a bronze plaque that's located in the narthex, or the lowest level of the bell tower. And you can read that all about Julian Abel, who designed the chapel and most of the buildings on West Campus. He was extremely talented and was sent by the Trumbauer Company to Europe to study Gothic architecture, of which there are many examples, of course, in Europe. So you can read that, and it's there in the narthex for you to read about. Also, I think in the narthex is another plaque that describes the empty niche in the portal of the exterior of the chapel. So maybe we can, okay. This is on the exterior, on the left side of the entrance to the chapel. Edwin Eugene Dacus was the superintendent of the quarry in Hillsborough, and it was his job to approve all the stones that were dug out of the quarry and transported by rail car that was built by the Duke family from the quarry in Hillsborough, that came up the center of the Abel Quad to deliver the stone. And to this day, after the chapel was built, as new buildings were being built, the rail tracks of the railroad have been unearthed because it was just cheaper to cover over those tracks than to dig them up and dispose of them. So it's very interesting, but this is the man, and I often ask children on tour of the chapel if they've been rock collectors. I was a rock collector as a child, and one of the amazing things about the development of Gothic architecture was it was all done by hand, and the stones were dug from the earth. And the trick, of course, is if you stack up rocks, you can only stack them up so far before they fall over. So the trick back then was not to go to Home Depot and buy a bag of cement. They didn't have Home Depot. And so, you know, it was using their imagination and what was in the earth, clay in the earth, dirt, sand, and how to mix that together to create the mortar to hold the stones together. So it's just an interesting process from centuries and centuries ago. So this is credit to the superintendent of the quarry. As you go in the front entrance of the chapel, you will see on either side of the entrance these portal figures. The Duke family was Methodist and Quaker, but Duke Chapel, and they had built a Methodist church in downtown Durham. Duke Memorial Methodist Church was built by the Duke family in 1907, and it's a beautiful Gothic structure as well. It's a true Gothic in that it has twin bell towers that flank the entrance. If you're not familiar with Duke Memorial, it's on West Main Street over the bridge to the freeway from Immaculate Conception Church, and it's a beautiful sanctuary. At any rate, here in the portal, we see the religious reformers that were chosen not for any particular reason. They were just religious reformers. And you can see there Nola, a Dominican friar and religious reformer, Martin Luther, and John Wycliffe, an English scholar and priest, there on the left. And then on the right side of the portal, these are prominent figures from the Southern American culture. Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, is next to the building. And then on the other end is the poet Sidney Lanier. These figures, none of them were chosen for any particular reason other than they were either reformers in the Christian movement or were important figures in the American South. They were not chosen for any particular political reasons at all. The empty niche there was once occupied by the figure of Robert E. Lee, but it was removed in 2017 because it was vandalized. And also in the narthex, you will see a plaque that describes why that niche is being left, and Robert E. Lee will not be put back in that niche. The dean of the chapel at the time, the president of the university at the time, and some other important Duke folks met and for over a year to decide what to do. And the decision was made collectively to leave that niche empty. As it says here, a hole that's in the heart of the United States of America, and perhaps in our own human hearts, that hole that is from the sin of racism and hatred of any kind. So that empty niche serves a purpose with a message. This is the portal again, where you see the figures on either side. And just above the doorway there, between the two doors, is the carved figure of John Wesley, who was very prominent in the Methodist movement. All of this is hand carved out of Indiana limestone. You know, again, there were no machines. This was all hand done by very talented sculptors that came over from Europe. The stonemasons that worked on the chapel, the wood carvers that worked on the chapel, this was all handwork, and they were all brought over from Europe to work on the not only the chapel but the buildings of West Campus. After when the New Deal came about, a lot of the stonemasons went up to the Blue Ridge Parkway of North Carolina and worked on some of those stone tunnels that are so beautiful on the parkway. So as we go into the chapel, you can see we're under the canopy of the Flintrop organ, which is a very large, beautiful organ that we hear played most Sundays for the processional. It is a beautiful organ, but what I want to call your attention to here is the lavender wash that you see on very sunny days that comes through the stained glass windows, and we'll talk about how that's achieved as we look at the windows. Here again is a look from the chancel area to the back toward the narthex, and you see a little glimpse of the Flintrop organ there. It is certainly our most beautiful pipe organ. We have 4 pipe organs. This is certainly our most beautiful one, but it is not our largest in terms of pipes. It only has about 5,000 pipes and was not installed in the chapel until 1976. It was made in the Netherlands by the Flintrop Company, but it was given to the university in honor of Benjamin Duke, who was the older son of Washington and the brother of James Buchanan Duke, whose vision all of this was. This is the creation window, which the windows in the nave of the chapel are stories from the Old Testament above and the New Testament below. This is the first window as you enter the nave on the top left. The stained glass windows were all designed and made in New York by the Bonnewick Company. And the idea behind these stained glass windows, we have 77 stained glass windows with over 1 million pieces of stained glass. I didn't count them. I'm just going on faith that it's 1 million pieces. People in the Middle Ages could not read or write, and so stained glass windows became over time a way to learn the stories of the Bible. In this window, we see Adam as the central figure holding a spade and presumably an apple. One of the things I'll point out in this window and all the other windows in the chapel are that the Bonnewick Company designers used the color green as a dual purpose color, meaning that in some instances it's for evil and other instances for good. So let me point out to you, if you're looking at it, the far right vertical vignette, at the top you'll see, thank you, 2 green deer. Deer are not green. Why are they green? Because going back to the designer's intent, green is used here as a symbol of the good of God creating all the animals of the earth. If we go down to the very bottom, just below Adam, you will see depicted the story of Cain and Abel. And over Cain's shoulder, you will see the head of a green dragon, which is an indication that he had evil purpose in his heart. So that sort of dual purpose is seen throughout the windows. There are 700 or 800 different figures in all the windows, and about 300 of them are life-size, which Adam and some of the other central figures are life-size. I want to point out that the figures in all the windows, these are not meant to be portraits of beautiful people. They're meant to just tell stories in human form and animal form. They're sort of loosely based on an old Egyptian Coptic art form. In some of the windows, you will see googly eyes, large extended hands and feet. That is a style from old Egyptian Coptic art. So again, the intent is not to portray beautiful people, it's to tell stories. This is the Noah window that we're seeing, and you can see Noah in his father's lap. His father's telling him that he's got a message from God that the world is becoming very evil and God is going to destroy the earth with a flood. And so as Noah grows up, he begins building an ark to save the animals and as many people from the flood. You will also see, and I don't know, Carol, how much they're seeing of this window, but you can see Noah in the center there with sort of a golden halo around his head. And he's holding an oar, which again is a clue. The artists are giving us clues as to these people and their roles in the story. Noah is also wearing a purple robe, which is highly unusual. Purple was a color reserved for royalty, and Noah was not royal in that sense, but it is used here as the color of his robe. Let me also point out, okay, this is the Annunciation window, and what I want to point out here is that some of the windows, all of the upper windows are stories from the Old Testament. All the windows that are on the lower or the aisle rows are from the New Testament. And what I will point out here is that if you look at this window quickly, you mostly see blue. In some of the other windows, you will see mostly red. And it is that was a design decision by the Bonnewitt company. Every other window is mostly red or mostly blue. And that goes horizontal. It also goes vertically. So that when the sun shines brightly, the nave is bathed in that lavender color that we saw earlier. So it's really kind of a magical thing that they came up with to bathe, you know, the chapel, which is very stark with the Guastavino tile and the ribbing of the vaulted ceiling. To bathe the chapel in that lavender light is, I find it just extraordinary from a design and color theory standpoint. This is the nativity window, and let me point out that if you look at this, you'll see that it's mostly red. So that's what you'll notice is red, blue, vertically and horizontally. One of the things that I often point out to children who tour is the wise man going to visit the baby Jesus. Now, you can see the heads and bodies of the three wise men, but they're riding two camels, and there are 7 camel legs visible. And so this is where you get like in poems, poets use poetic license. This you'll see artistic or design license to just show what is important to the story. And the importance in this window is, of course, the wise men coming to see the baby Jesus. Here is another really good example. This window is an aisle window from the New Testament, of course, and it's on, if you're going down the center aisle of the chapel, this window is on your right-hand side. And this is Jesus carrying his cross to his crucifixion. And of course, it's green. And so using the dual purpose color theory that I spoke about earlier, the cross is green, which you could interpret as evil because he's going to his crucifixion, or good because he's going to be risen from the dead. But this again points to the dual purpose of green. This is a wonderful view of the vaulted ceiling of the nave. It's a ribbed ceiling. If you can look at those, what we call ribs that that form the top of the pier buttressing that create. This is a 73-foot high window, and it's the ribbing that then goes down into the pillars, the large pillars that line the nave. And then they go up and over the triforium and to the exterior of the building. So it's sort of like a bridge effect to create the height. And it's called pier buttressing. If you've been to the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., they have a really good example of flying buttresses where you see the buttressing on the exterior. But we have what's called pier buttressing, which is a little less visible to your eyes. This, of course, is the beautiful chancel where we always hear such beautiful music. All of this carving was done by hand, and the great chancel window is notable for having at the very tippy top, Jesus is at the top. Yeah, right up there is the designer's depiction of the face of God. He's very googly-eyed and cartoon looking almost, but that's because the Word of God is serious business. And the designers put in the face of God to keep us focused on, he's looking toward the pulpit to keep us focused on the Word. There are only 9 of the disciples pictured here because along the bottom behind those carved figures are prophets from the Old Testament, which is always the foundation. New Testament. The other disciples are in the transept windows. Each of the disciples' robes are colored based, and they are holding clues to who they are in following Jesus. These lit dioramas are carved limewood figures that depict the 3 major events in the life of Jesus. On the left is Jesus as a young man learning from the teachers at the temple. The middle scene is Jesus at his trial before Pontius Pilate, and the far right scene is Jesus at his death, surrounded by his disciples. This is a view of the north transept. Beautiful windows in the north transept, which have depicted men and women from the Old and the New Testament, and one of our original chandeliers. One of the things I like to talk about on tours is this beautifully carved canopy over the pulpit. At the top is a carved figure of Jesus Christ, the King of the world, and there are a lot of angels hand carved on that canopy. What's interesting about this view is that you'll see a microphone at the pulpit. I don't know about you. I was born in 1947, but there were no microphones in the 1930s that you could see at a pulpit. But how did the minister get his message out to, we can see about 1,800 people at Duke Chapel? Well, the answer is that carved canopy is the original sound system. And the minister's voice would hit the base of that canopy and be projected outward so that people in the back of the chapel could hear. Sort of like what we used to do with empty soup cans and waxed string, you know, when we were little, playing spies and all that fun stuff. Art museums and science museums use that same technique in some of their demonstrations. This is another view of the beautiful Flintrop organ, which, again, the Flintrop company in the Netherlands built it, and it does contain gold leaf, and it is our most beautiful pipe organ, but it's not our biggest. All of our pipe organs play different kinds of music. And the Flintrop, of course, we hear mostly with processionals, recessionals, and sometimes I've heard the Flintrop being played in concert with our original Aeolian organ that's located in the chancel, but it certainly is a beautiful organ. This is the Kathleen Upton Burns McClendon organ, or as we like to call it on our tours, the Aeolian, which was installed in the chapel in 1932, just before the completion of. It's hard to see, but it's a very nondescript carved oak box that houses that pipe organ that has 7,000 pipes. Most of them are hidden in walls in the north and south transepts and also in walls of the chancel. It is a beautiful sounding organ that is maintained beautifully by our geniuses who keep these organs tuned and cared for. Aeolian, interesting enough, was a company that outbid their closest competitor to build this church organ for the Duke family. This is the only church organ that the Aeolian company ever built. They were used to building small organs for wealthy families to have in their homes. For example, Renolda House in Winston-Salem, another tobacco baron, the Reynolds family, if you've ever visited their home that's open to visitors, they have a small residential Aeolian there. And there are other Aeolians that were built for other wealthy people. The Aeolian company went out of business, was bought out by their competitor who finished the work, but we still call it the Aeolian. Aeolian is an interesting word because loosely translated from it means the breath of God. And as you know from people who play the organ, they press down on a pedal to push air up through the pipes. And so the idea is that air comes up with the beautiful music being played and sung, and that's the breath of God being disseminated above all of us to add to the spiritual life that we love there. This is the baptismal font that's located in the memorial chapel, but is on rollers and could be brought out for baptisms in worship services. It's kept in the memorial chapel. It was carved by some Durham wood carvers and given to the chapel about 12 or 15 years ago, I believe. But it is a beautiful piece of workmanship. Also in the Memorial Chapel, you will see the Carrera marble sarcophagi of the three Duke men. In the center is Washington Duke, the patriarch, and at his feet, his oldest son, Benjamin Newton Duke, whose wife, Sarah, gave money for Sarah Duke Gardens. At Washington Duke's head is his younger son, James Buchanan Duke, whose statue is out on the Able Quad. And it was James Buchanan Duke, known as Buck, who was instrumental. All of this was his vision. Duke University and the chapel were all his vision. The Memorial Chapel was also designed by Julian Abel, but it was paid for by about 8,000 close friends and admirers of the Duke family, as a memorial to the Duke family and their generosity to the Durham community. Off to the right of this picture, you will see the beautiful Brombaugh organ, which is an Italian Renaissance organ that was designed by a man who lived in Oregon and who traveled to Europe to study Italian Renaissance design. This beautiful organ has about 3,000 pipes or less. And you can hear it if you've ever taken communion on our non-communion worship services. It's played there. All of our organs play different kinds of music. They're not all tuned to the same kind of music. We're not built for the same kinds of music. Our fourth pipe organ is a very small organ that stays housed in the chancel area and has 156 wooden pipes that are housed within the organ casing itself. And it's rolled out for soloists and other different musical presentations. And it's also a lovely sounding, but they're all four beautiful sounding organs in their own right. They don't all sound the same. So I'm not an organ person. I just am an admirer of the music that they play. And Chad and our other organ and music folks are fabulous with their skills. This is an up close of James Buchanan Duke's marble sarcophagi, and the three Duke men are actually buried in these sarcophagi, and they each are lying in repose. And again, this is all hand carving and beautifully realistic, even down to the folds of their covers. And the way their hands are is magnificent carving. This is the crypt, which is beside the stairs going down to the crypt are located as you come out of the Memorial Chapel, or just to the left of the lectern in the chancel. This is a Romanesque style crypt, and it is the windows in the crypt are a very pale lavender. They're very beautiful windows. And I'll also add that all the chandeliers that are in the chapel are all original from the building of the chapel. This crypt is used for storage of the front pieces that go on the altar. Also the candles are stored there. And there are also buried in the crypt some dignitaries from Duke, past presidents. This is a small chapel area in the crypt, which is used by small classes and such. I want to call your attention, though, to the altar table in this picture. The candlesticks and the cross, as I understand it, are originals that were originally in the chapel on the altar table, but the cross was so small that another one was either purchased or donated, as were different candlesticks. But these are original from the chancel area. As I said, I believe there are about 33 burial spots in the crypt. And this shows the bronze plaques for Terry Sanford and his wife, Margaret Rose, a very, very popular governor of North Carolina, a United States senator, and a president of Duke University. He was well loved, and you know, that was back when bipartisan politics were, you know, wonderful. But Terry Sanford and his wife, Margaret Rose, and occasionally when we go down there, there will be flowers, fresh flowers laid for them. This is William Preston Few's resting place in the crypt. He was a friend of James Buchanan Duke, who helped him cite the place for the chapel, the high geographical point on West. He was the first president of Duke University, and he was also president of Trinity College, which we now call East Campus. However, Trinity College still has an arts and science curriculum, and students can still graduate from Trinity College with a degree under the umbrella of Duke University. So he's buried there. His family are active members still at Duke Memorial Methodist Church on West Main Street. So the Few family was really important to Duke University and Durham. This sort of concludes our virtual tour. There's lots more information available. You can go online and find a lot of the history of Duke Chapel and history about the windows. There's also a wonderful book in the Gothic Bookshop in the Bryan Center called Duke Chapel Illuminated, which gives a wonderful accounting of the building of the chapel and West Campus and of the stained glass windows. I love this picture at sunset of the chapel because it shows the magnificent height of the bell tower. And of course, those spires can be seen for miles around coming into Durham. But this also shows you the cruciform exterior shape of the chapel. So it's been such a joy and a pleasure to share a little bit of my knowledge about the chapel with you guys. And we do tours every Sunday after worship, and we'd love for you to join us. There's also tower climbs up to the top of the bell tower. I've never been. I have bad knees, so I've never been, but I hear the view is perfectly magnificent. So thank you for allowing me this time with you this evening, and I hope that you will read more and enjoy the chapel just as much as all of the docents do.